Hi guys, John from LookSmart Home Inspections here in New Jersey. And one of the challenging aspects of being a home inspector is delivering that bad news or that unwelcome news to clients. And I find this is more prevalent in homes that have been recently renovated or staged because clients tend to go into a house and they look at all the nice finishes, right? They see a brand new kitchen or new bathrooms or a beautiful, master suite, and everything looks great on the surface because they're trying to, picture their family living in the home, where the kids' room are going to be, where the office is going to be set up, picturing their family gathering, in the kitchen or hanging out in large open concept living room or great room, whatever you have there. And the challenging aspect of home inspection is delivering that news that really no one sees coming. Nobody really understands that there's a lot of infrastructure in these homes that we as home inspectors here in New Jersey have to look at. And many times buyers, and I'm not saying that this is their fault or anyone's fault, it's just how it is they're looking at the home in sort of a surface level, type of situation. They're not really spending time on the outside. They're not really spending a lot of time in the basement, the mechanical room, the garage, the detached garage, the attic. They're looking more of the interior rooms, right? Bedrooms, kitchens, bathrooms, that type of thing. And you can't blame them. They're there for a limited time and they're trying to figure out, will this house work for my family, right? And so, the New Jersey home inspector comes along and then we start talking about systems and infrastructure and electrical and plumbing and roofing and things. And sometimes things, don't go as planned for the buyer, right? Because, our job is to tell you the conditions of the home, at the time of the home inspection. So, things that we're looking at and buyers may not be looking at closely, just to give an example, is like roofing and different types of roofing have different age and life expectancies. The most prominent, obviously, here in New Jersey is an architectural asphalt, roof shingle, and that has a certain life expectancy. And generally, buyers don't know how to ascertain the the roof, and what possibly can look like a really solid and good roof may not be upon closer, inspection and examination and all of the sort of the roofing systems that go along with it because you're as a buyer just looking at it briefly. Maybe you look up, you don't understand, you're not looking at the chimney, you're not looking at the flashing system, you're not looking at the gutter system, you're not looking at the roof penetrations and things like that, like a good New Jersey home inspector will. And sometimes, we're obviously going to find things that you don't. And, you kind of have to come to terms with that. No house is perfect. And, a good home inspector doing a comprehensive home inspection is going to find issues wrong. I mean, that's our job, is to tell you what's happening and what you should expect and what are the problems, in the home. Another aspect of this is sort of the electrical system. And the electrical system is basically hidden from you, right? You're not an electrical contractor. You're not going to be, thoroughly inspecting the GFCI protection, the electrical outlets, the circuit wiring in the home. You're not going to be opening up the panel box cover, right? You're not going to be examining any other electrical, issues in the home. You're just going to kind of just pass by that whole system. I mean, maybe if you're a handy person, you're gonna figure out, how large is the electrical service. But for the most part, that's where your inspection is going to end, and that's where the New Jersey home inspector inspection begins. And so these houses can be absolutely beautiful inside, And then they can have these, larger electrical problems like older wiring, aluminum wiring, you know, in older homes, knob and tube wiring, panel boxes that are obsolete, outdated, unsafe, different, amateur wiring, which we see all the time. People just tend to do their own wiring in these homes. And there's, a myriad of problems that we can uncover. So that's also another thing that the buyer is likely not to be aware of, is sort of the electrical, defects in the home. And that kind of goes hand in hand also with plumbing. Plumbing, we see a lot of amateur type plumbing work, weekend type of plumbing work. Now, I have nothing against, people doing their own work. It's totally fine. I do my own work here in my own house, as long as it's done correctly, right? It doesn't really matter as long as it's done to a standard that is, acceptable, that it meets code requirements, and that type of thing. So, we see older plumbing, we see older main water piping to the home. The house is beautiful, totally renovated, and then we have a lead water line coming in, from the home, or, from the street connection. We have, still galvanized piping in homes. We have sort of a myriad of different piping types, all kind of, added together, all just kind of pieced together in a lot of these homes. And so that's another thing where, a good New Jersey home inspector is going to be looking at your plumbing system and making sure that that is, sort of up to standard. And a lot of times, that's just something that's not on the mind of the of the client. They're just, they're looking at the surface stuff, and you can't blame them. But that's, the benefit of having a thorough and complete New Jersey home inspection, is that we uncover these problems. And the age of, and the reliability and the functionality of heating equipment, right? Older boilers, older HVAC, older air conditioning units, things like that. We're also going to be reporting on, how are these units functioning in the home, and does the configuration, because when you go into a house, you're not looking at the, return configuration of the HVAC. You're not, looking at the performance of the boiler, or all the radiators, getting hot in the home. Is there enough velocity of airflow, through the vents? And the position of the vents plays a lot on that, and also the type of construction, and where these returns are located. So that's something that, a good New Jersey home inspector is going to be really going to shed a lot of light on. I do myself find a lot of problems with HVAC. I find a lot of issues with configuration, with return installation, location of returns, number of registers, size of ductwork, type of ductwork, all of that. And that's not prominent when you just, walking through a home, just to kind of tour the house and seeing if your family is going to be comfortable there. So that's another way for a New Jersey home inspector to sort of bring to light all of these issues that exist, is the HVAC. And then we have sort of the cover-ups of water into the basement or crawl space, and that type of thing. When you'd be surprised when I go into a basement, and the first thing my antenna goes up instantly, and I'm thinking water. I'm thinking, do we have a problem here? What are the issues? I'm looking for evidence of water entry, efflorescence, seepage, looking under carpeting. I'm looking under basement steps. I'm doing all of those things, right? Because I understand that in these really pretty houses, things get covered up. And, a good New Jersey home inspector is going to know where to look, for these possible issues. And a lot of times, buyers don't see them, for whatever reason, multiple times. I've gone down into basements at home. I've instantly seen, evidence of water penetration, seepage, where, even mold. And it just goes really unnoticed by everybody in the transaction thus far. The agent doesn't notice it. The other agent doesn't notice it. The buyer doesn't know it's there. The seller doesn't know it's there. And like, I'm like, and I'm thinking to myself, how do you miss this? Like, I mean, it's just so prominent. What's happening? I mean, you see these, these, foot high water stains in the basement. Got all this mold on these walls. I mean, how, like, what are you looking at, right? So, you guys are looking, clients are looking at other things. They're not looking at these things. So it's really our job to kind of, bring everybody into, the reality of, what could be going on. The next thing is really the sewer line. And I'm a big proponent of sewer line inspections, and not just because I do them, is because, the sewer line is an interest, it's something that home inspectors, we just can't see without doing a sewer scope or a push camera inspection, of the main sewer line. There's just no way to see that. Basically, what we can view is if it's an open basement, is the waste piping in the basement, how's that configured, how's that pitched, what the trapping looks like, stuff like that. But that main lateral that goes from the basement to the city tap or municipal connection is just completely hidden because it's underground. And the only way to do that is to access the sewer line and use a specialty camera to, view that sewer line and to take pictures and video of any, anomalies or anything that's going wrong. And you'd be surprised, how many issues these sewer lines actually have, whether it be, tree roots or displacement or movement or water retention, actually cracked and damaged, and just, overall collapsing sometimes of the sewer line, where your, wastewater is just kind of collecting and going into the, the surrounding environment and not into the city sewer. So there's a lot of defects that can happen there. There's different types of piping that we look at. And it kind of tells us a story about what's happening, with the sewer line. But many of these houses that look real beautiful, they have a sewer line that's original back from the, the 30s, 40s, and 50s. And then, you wonder how it's even working, right? So it's important to have that sewer line inspection. The sewer line, to me, is something super, super important, because without a sewer line scope, you move into the house, you buy the home, those problems are yours, right? You can't go back and do anything about it once you, take possession and close on the home. I mean, yeah, sure, there's, these insurance policies that you can probably purchase on your sewer line, but are they really going to cover you for all this pre-existing stuff that exists there? I'm not so sure. So be aware of a sewer line inspection is also a, super important aspect of a complete, New Jersey home inspection. I know it adds some money to the cost of the home inspection, but, money well spent. I mean, you're not going to miss that money 10 years down. I mean, it's just a good piece of due diligence for sure. So in today's short video, I just kind of want to give you an idea of where a buyer comes into a house and they're looking at different things in their own mind and reference frame. Where a home inspector is not really looking at any of that prettiness, any of that sort of functionality. We're looking more on the infrastructure basis. What are the issues and the defects and the material defects that are existing in this house that, we're working for the client to, properly inspect. So I just kind of want to give you an idea how our two sort of frames and the way we view homes, differ a great deal, because many times I'll work for a client and we'll explain some defects, we'll explain this and that, and they'll never know that those things even existed there. And the agent will never know that, those things existed there, because they're using a different frame in their mind about, looking at the house. And, not everybody is educated as far as, home maintenance and, things like that. And so we're just coming at things, very differently. So that's why, buyers here in New Jersey, they're spending a lot of money on homes here, and they really shouldn't skimp on a home inspection. Don't try to save a couple $100 on an inexpensive home inspector, when a veteran home inspector can do, twice the job, at just, a little bit more cost, a little bit more expense. You're getting so much more by hiring a veteran home inspector who's, been around for decades rather than, 1 or 2 years, right? So, if you guys have any questions about home inspections, your house you're buying, or even your own home, my name is John. I'm from LookSmart Home Inspections right here in New Jersey. Been doing home inspections for 25 years. Have the privilege of working with thousands of buyers, doing thousands of homes. Just want to, thank you for watching the video, and we'll see you next time.